Professor S.D. Muni, Ambassador Ranjit Ray, Dr. Deepak Prakash Bhatt, Dr. Nihar Nayak, Major General Vinod Varshneth, Kamaldev Bhattrai, scholars, friends from media, and dear participants. Namaste and good afternoon. Welcome to a very special session on Nepal-India relations, exploring new dimensions, organized by Nepal Institute for International Cooperation and Engagement. We are aware that we have a new government in Nepal, and the newly elected Prime Minister Pushpakamal Dahal Prachanda might visit India anytime soon. It is in this context we decided to look at different contours of Nepal-India relations, the two countries that enjoy excellent ties. What we have decided is to avoid repetition, so we'll raise few questions and request the speakers to make their remarks in maximum 15 minutes based on those guiding questions. Let me start with Professor S.D. Muni. Professor S.D. Muni needs no introduction, but as a customary, Professor Muni is Professor Emeritus at Jawaharlal Nehru University and member of Executive Council of Institute of Defense Studies and Analysis.
No longer.
Apart from JNU, he was also associated with National University of Singapore, Banaras Hindu University, and University of Rajasthan. Professor Muni served as India's special envoy to the Southeast Asian countries on United Nations Security Council reforms and represented India's Minister of External Affairs at the 50th anniversary celebration of the Paris Peace Conference held in Phnom Penh, Cambodia. He also served as India's ambassador to Laos, and he was nominated as the first ever constituted National Security Advisory Board of India during 1990-1991. In 2005, he was bestowed with the Sri Lanka Ratna Award, which is Sri Lanka's highest national award for a foreign nation. Professor Muni, please make your remarks in 50 minutes. And let me raise a few questions that can help you to come with your remarks. Like, how has Nepal-India relations evolved over the years? Do you see any changes in the relations of two countries with the changing regimes in Nepal? That is one. How important is Nepal in India's neighborhood first policy? Is there any changes in India's policy towards Nepal since India adopted its neighborhood first policy, or it was old wine in new bottle? Again, how prominent is Nepal studies in Indian universities and think tanks? How many Nepal study centers exist in India, and how vibrant are those institutions? Again, in recent times, there is increasing interest of US in Nepal. Similarly, China is also expanding its presence in Nepal. How is the US and Chinese increasing presence in Nepal going to impact Nepal-India ties? Professor Muni, over to you.
Thank you, Pramod. It's always a pleasure to be with your panel, and your command is always respected by me. I have a lot of affection for you. You gave me the title of New Vistas of New Visions of India-Nepal relations. I was thinking along some different lines, and then this morning, these 4 questions came. So I think first let me respond to these 4 questions. And then if there is time left, I'll say something which I thought I would say. On the first question, for instance, how the relationship has changed. Substantially, it has not changed, but there are nuances which are somewhat different now. For instance, there is a declining interest in monarchy in Nepal in India now. There are sections which are still interested in monarchy, but from the beginning, even Nehru's time, there was a lot of respect for monarchy and monarchical institutions, and despite India's commitment to democracy, we continued to support monarchy in one way or the other. Now, secondly, there is a greater emphasis on cultural and civilization aspects. And there are constituencies within the ruling establishment in India which would be delighted to see Nepal redesignated as a Hindu state. I personally don't quite approve of that approach. That is not good for Nepal. That is not good for India. But this is an emphasis, and there is a lot of encouragement to forces in Nepal which are religiously oriented, particularly towards Hindu state. Though when we talk of cultural synergy and civilizational context, Buddhism is referred to, Lumbini is referred to. There is an effort to show that we want to build up a Buddhist pilgrimage circuit, so on and so forth. But this is a new emphasis during Nehru's time, Indira Gandhi's time, even Manmohan Singh's time. There was not much emphasis on this religious and cultural dimension. It was almost taken for granted. Thirdly, I think, and I may be wrong, maybe Ranjit would correct me, there is a great deal of caution and hesitation in investing in mega projects. You know, earlier during the 50s and 60s, India invested hugely in the mega projects, particularly revival of connectivity, those which are linked with the strategic aspects. But for almost 4 decades, during 70s, 80s, 90s, and the first decade of this century, there was not much emphasis on mega projects. Though now there is a renewed interest and focus on infrastructure projects because we are competing with China in a very significant manner, particularly on the hydropower, which was of mutual interest and win-win situation. Therefore, there is some revival of greater investment in Nepal in building infrastructure, building connectivity. And lastly, there is a great sense of rivalry with China, which did not exist in 50s, 60s, or even 70, not to that extent. There was unhappiness, there was a caution about that, but not actually to that extent. So this is my answer to your first question. Your second question is Nepal's, what is the importance of Nepal in the neighborhood first policy? It is very much important and quite a considerable weight is being given to Nepal when it comes to what you call the neighborhood policy. But there are nuances which you must keep it in mind. That priority is on India's own concern now, and there is a great deal of priority. Particularly, you saw that on the constitutional issues. We see this every day on China-related issues, and there is a great concern for having a very friendly government in Kathmandu. It was there earlier also, but India dealt with different kind of governments, adjusted with them. But now, because of the competition, rivalry with China, because of more enhanced security concern, there is a great deal of emphasis on having a friendly government in Kathmandu. But you know, it is still I am somewhat confused. I don't see a clearly defined vision in Indian policy making as to what kind of a Nepal India wants in terms of institutions, in terms of its political culture, in terms of its economic development. I mean, vaguely we talk about democracy, we talk about security, we talk about an inclusive secular constitution, but there is no clear vision is spelled out, and the policy is not linked to that vision in a very, very strong manner. There are references occasionally, and a lot of adjustments are being made, but I find this is a significant aspect of neighborhood policy. Also, I see that the role of stakeholders, and if I may say extra constitutional vested interests, have increased in India's policy. I find a lot of interest of the intelligence, a lot of active role of the intelligence agencies, a lot of BJP and RSS sectional interests are being deployed in the Nepal policy, or they're being heeded to. People like the UP Chief Minister, Mr. Yogi, are considerably influential in what happens in Nepal. So I find this as a, now I don't want to say, and I accept that the vested interests have always been powerful in India's policy making. And they are now also powerful, but the character and the nature of these vested interests or stakeholders, if you want to give a more respectable name, have changed in that sense. But your third question was about Nepal studies. I'm sorry to say that they are declining in India all over. I mean, there are some of the very important centers which have considerably eroded. Look at the Banaras Hindu University Center of Nepal Studies. Also in the Nehu, I think they had a lot of emphasis on Nepal-Bhutan studies, no longer true there. In Jaipur, it's totally eroded. At the top of it in JNU, it is not there. And there are many reasons for that. I think the inflow of Nepali students have reduced. The quality of teachers which are there in these universities do not have much academic interest, much research interest in Nepal, and therefore not many students are forthcoming. There is a lack of commitment on the part of teachers, and the recruitments are taking mostly on the basis of patronage, or in terms of there is a post lying vacant, so we should get post, but that's not really conducive to promoting Nepal studies. There are scholarship problems from ICSSR, from UGC. Sometimes the Nepalese students are asked to pay the foreigners' fee in Indian universities in terms of dollars. There are all kind of other institutional structural impediments which have come in promoting Nepal studies in India. And your last question was that foreign presence in US, particularly of US and China, you have mentioned about it. I think India was never very comfortable with a foreign presence in particularly Nepal, in the entire periphery, in the entire neighborhood. But I see some changes taking place, that there is a realization in India that China's growing presence cannot be dealt with by India alone. And therefore, there is a reliance and dependence on some of the extra regional powers. US is included, Japan is included. I think there is a lot of what you call coexistence and coordination in India's approach and India's presence in Nepal, so far as it is concerned. And therefore, this is how it has developed. These are my responses to your 4 questions. Now, if you give me 5 minutes, I just want to say, in terms of new vistas, what is it which India should do? I think to begin with, it should emphasize on connectivity. Connectivity not only in terms of infrastructure of roads and rails, but also connectivity in terms of power. And that is becoming an increasingly big issue now, because the power sector has now gone to the private sector as well, and a lot of interest is there. And there are questions of prices, there are questions of for instance, it's a big question that the power projects, hydropower projects, in which the Chinese have invested, India would not buy that power. Now, India has its own strategic security reasons for not buying that power. And Nepalis are raising this as a big issue. Now, my submission would be that why should not Nepal use that power in industrializing the country in its own way? Why it is necessary that the power produced by every project has only got to be sold out? I think Nepal is almost very hungry still, despite the level of power production going up in Nepal. So I think that it can be used in this manner. But these are the issues that in terms of connectivity, I think in future, both India and Nepal will have to work out where the connectivity issues are sorted out and development is advanced further. Then there is an aspirational Nepal. You know, so many young people in Nepal are going out to seek their jobs. I know that the remittances which they are sending are is a very substantial part of Nepal's economy. And every Nepal government want that kind of remittances to keep coming. But actually, the remittances are a poor substitute of the talent and skill, which the people, if they did not go, will really bring into Nepal in terms of Nepal's development. And I think India should devote some attention, and Nepalese government should also work out to improve the skills of the Nepali youth and find out new opportunities of economic prosperity within Nepal rather than going outside it. India needs to work there in terms of educational sector, in terms of skill sector, and in terms of creating opportunities, that is businesses, industrialization, information, information technology, and various areas where India has its own strength. It should share with Nepal in terms of technology and see that that kind of a development take place. Thirdly, I think India should help Nepal stabilize and institutionalize its inclusive democracy. I think I won't say much about the present political situation in Nepal, but Nepal is passing through a serious political turbulence. And so long as the insecurity prevails, political insecurity prevails in Nepal, political uncertainty prevails in Nepal, changing equations prevail in Nepal, Nepal and India would not be able to take any positive, any concrete decisions. And lastly, I would say the competition with China, which India is facing, is really worried about it. I think this can become a big, major question. It has become a big, major question in the bilateral relations. And it would be wonderful if the two countries can sit down and evolve a consensus as to how to deal with China. While Nepal would need whatever assistance is being offered by China, Nepal should also be cautious that that assistance does not hurt its interest with India. I hope some of these aspects are relevant in the unfolding India-Nepal relations, and probably we can discuss them further. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Muni. Thank you so much for your wonderful remarks. May I now invite Dr. Deepak Prakash Bhatt for his remarks. Dr. Deepak Prakash Bhatt is founding chairperson of Nepal Center for Security Governance, and he holds his PhD from School of International Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University. He is former member of Parliament, the House of Representatives of Nepal, and he has served as a member of Technical Committee and Secretariat of the Special Committee for Supervision, Integration, and Rehabilitation of Maoist Army Combatants in 2009. He is also visiting faculty at different universities and colleges of Nepal. Dr. Bhatt, you may focus on these questions while making remarks, like, as you come from the border town of Nepal, how do you look at the people-to-people ties between people of two countries? That is one. Second is, India has played important role in all the major political transition of Nepal. How do you look at India's role in Nepal's democratization? Third is, how India and Nepal can work together to promote tourism and boost regional connectivity, which is the demand of the people on the borders. And lastly, how could Nepal benefit from the economic development of India, in particular, the development in digital technology and IT? How can Nepal bring in investment from Indian business sectors in diverse sector of Nepalese economy? Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Pramod Jaiswal. And thank you, NICE team, as NICE has been always conducting important issues, and the discussion series you have been bringing different minds with different backgrounds and contributing in the national on the international discourse of these areas. Respected panelists, Professor Muni, Ambassador Ray, General Binoz, and Dr. Nihar. It's my pleasure to be here with all you, and while talking about the Nepal-India relations and new avenues or the new areas of possible engagements. And while talking about the people to people ties between two countries and living in the border area, what I have seen that there are changes are coming. In terms of connectivity, we can see that, uh, but from my own area in the Sudur Pasim province, the whole province doesn't have any formal trade route with India. So, I mean, Karnali is the single province of Nepal out of 7, which doesn't have a border with India, but the rest other provinces have good connectivity in terms of trade and roads. But Sudur Pasim or the region doesn't have any formal trade route. So that have been a bottleneck for the good relation, good transportation, or the good connectivity in terms of trade route and all these things. And because of that, only the normal people to people movement and the cultural activities and sometimes academic or other kind of programs or these kind of things are happening. So that makes, yes, the changes on the both side have been realized by policymakers but not implemented in a significant manner. But in recent past we can see that from Nepal side, dry port in the Dodara Chandani has been proposed, which India said will connect with its national highway from Khatima Manbasa, the Udham Singh Nagar in the Champao district, adjoining at the Uttarakhand state. So in near future, hopefully that it will have a trade route and that will give some mobility and some contribution to the economy of that area. And with that, I hope that it will make more strengthened ties in the relations between the two sides, Nepal-India border side. And while talking about the second question, you're asking about the India's important role in all the transition or the political changes in the Nepal and how it is contributing to the democratization. Yes, it is there. And side by side, what we have seen that from a Nepali perspective, in terms of institutionalizing, we cannot, or the Nepalis cannot blame uh, India or the international community that it's not sustaining or it's always remaining in a transition. So it's the more on the political parties and the leadership, those who have been at that time leading the parties or the government or different institutions have done many, uh, rather I should say, the blunders which have they got chances, political parties or the individual leaders. Individuals are important whenever they are in the key positions. So, but that has not well dealt with the democratization issue within the institutions, and of course, and then dealing with the Nepal-India relations. But from external dimension, if India and Nepal relation, how uh, India has dealt with the foreign policy or the democratization, all these things, I see that there is a problem that democratization and the more transparency in the relations or the foreign economic relations, security relations, all that has been lacking, and that has made some stumbling blocks. And time and again, we have seen that supporting or creating such environment that it will remain in a transition. That sometimes it's only blame, but sometimes it's reality. It has been remain as a such actor. And the third thing, when you are talking about the Nepal-India, how they can work together to promote tourism and the regional connectivity, there are plenty of, areas, and there are many areas, and there are, uh, uh, I think, of course, like, if we see that the highest number of tourists in Nepal are coming from India, but with that, what Nepal is uh, providing, I mean, infrastructure wise, improving in that sector is lacking because of the political instability. We can again, I mean, time and again, repeating these things may not sounds very well, but it's similar. But in the recent past, I think things are changing for that regional connectivity. Yes, there is provision of the BVIN, but it was not moving forward because of the uh, Bhutan's reluctancy. But Nepal, India, and border mobility, that vehicles in the Nepal side, they're easily coming, and now in India also with the formal permissions from the embassy or the transportation authorities, they can moving, they can go in the some nearby towns of the India, but that can be raised for the mobility of the other areas with the modern technology and the roads and the highways constructed in India. And tourism can be a best area for Nepal's economic prosperity, one of the. So for that, from that angle, Nepal should have prepared itself, but it cannot be in that line in the last decade also. From private sector, yes, I mean individually the people are doing a lot, but in terms of policy or the policy framework, the ministerial engagement and the structures that should be foresee or made by government are lacking. So again, on the Nepal side, it is lacking. But if you look at from the India side, what they are doing, government level, again, people to people level, individuals are coming to the Pashupati, then going to the Lumini and going to the Janakpur and then Muktinath and all other religious places and the having good time in the hill areas of the all these things. But these are the nominal things. This has been a routine of the border areas and the normal. But from the government side, government level, Indian side had also not prepared any policy or any serious engagement or any infrastructure. We cannot see there. In terms of the fourth question is you are asking about how Nepal can get benefit from the economic development, especially in the digital India, digital technology and the IT and all these things, and bringing the Indian business community and trade infrastructure, trade in a bigger volume to contribute Nepal's economy. I see in the changing context, or especially the disturbing power matrix of the Nepal in China, India, and then China, US, as already they are competing in a geopolitical context. And that from that dynamics, Nepal should, as having been a long, good relation, time and again, there are dual things, but with India, uh, we must, I mean, in a if you look at the Raisina dialogue and the SU meetings and all these things, Nepal is is like seen sidelined or ignored, something like that. So these kind of activities also make sense that it is not well treated. As said, the neighborhood first policy, but where is the mechanism and where are the infrastructure? I mean, infrastructures wise, these mechanisms or the new mechanisms which are set up or already in acceleration there are not working in a Nepal-India relation in a better way or not moving ahead. So in this overall new metrics of the political geopolitical dynamics, I think that uh, and the IT sector of India, which is will be soon leading the world, or still they have been contributing a lot in that sector. Nepal should take benefit, but for that purpose, again, it should be looking into the uh, domestic or the national infrastructure better first, and then uh, protecting data security and all these things are very important at that point. So taking benefit means, I think, is the uh, business sector, as Professor Muni was talking about the energy sector, and similarly in the agricultural sector, Nepal should need protect its domestic productions and of course competing and making some special benefits of uh, WTO regime, while India as a bigger and the larger economy and big sector of the agriculture or trade, all these things getting benefit. But for Nepal, it has been remaining in a kind of dilemma, or the infrastructure wise it is not competing or cannot compete. But if you look at the example of the poultry sector, only one example I can say, yes, it is I mean, it's not competing, but it is sustaining. So these kind of some areas must be developed, and then we can have a better cooperation for the bilateral I mean, bilateral beneficial diversifying that the benefit of the growing Indian economy. As far as I've seen that in the last 2000 years, 15 to 1700 years of the Indian economy, which has dominated the world economy, as we can see that. But now after when it has become the fifth largest economy and will be leading in future. For that perspective, Nepal should prepare with its internal infrastructure, engaging India and having good relation and the benefits of the both countries. The good relation. So I will stop here, Dr. Pramod. So these are the my points and my analysis regarding the Nepal-India current relation and the new avenues. So I will stop here and I will be happy to take any queries and questions later. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Deepak Prasad. May I now invite Ambassador Ranjit Ray. Ambassador Ranjit Ray is former India's ambassador to Hungary, Vietnam, and Nepal. He's an Indian diplomat with over 30 years of experience in Indian Foreign Service, and he has since held various positions in international and state organizations, bodies, including Permanent Mission of India at the United Nations, the United Nations Advisory Committee on Administrative and Budgetary Questions, as well as Office of the Minister of External Affairs and the President of India, where he served as Press Secretary to the President. As a Senior Policy Advisor to the United Nations Mission in Kosovo, Mr. Ray served in close coordination with United Nations Secretary General within the Department of Peacekeeping Operations on issues related to field operations. And Mr. Ray, maybe you can make your remarks on a few of these questions. Like one is that in your recent book, the first chapter of your book, Kathmandu Dilemma, Resetting India-Nepal Ties, is the first chapter is why don't they, which means Nepali, like us? So the question is, why do Nepali not like Indian? Is the question, which might be the answer in your book, which many of our audience might not have read. Second is that Indian experts often accuse that there is increasing anti-Indianism in Nepal. How far is it true? If yes, what are the reasons behind it? And how can both the countries work to minimize it? Third, how does India support Nepal in human resource development and capacity building? Like how many scholarship, training, and exchanges are provided to different institutions like ITEC, ICCR, and all. Lastly, India is often accused of interfering into Nepal's affair. In your book, you mentioned that the then Home Minister asks you for your opinion about the selection of IGP. Is there only Indian interference, or even Nepal also invite those kind of opinions? So how do you want to look at it? Over to you.
Well, thank you, Pramod, and congratulations to NICE for organizing this important seminar. I have a lot of the answers to the questions that you've raised in my book, and I'll just go over them briefly. But like Professor Muni, I also wanted to look at the new vistas aspect of the relationship, and maybe I'll come to that after I respond to the questions that you've raised. And actually, of the 4 questions, I think 3 of them can be lumped together. Why Nepalese don't like India, why is there anti-Indianism, anti-Indian sentiment, and is India interfering in Nepal? I think these can be really tackled as a bunch. And part of this problem, of course, is structural. Given the asymmetry in the relationship in terms of the size, given the fact that Nepal feels it is surrounded by India on 3 sides, and in the north it has the Himalayas. I think you asked Deepak Bhatt about India's involvement in the democratization processes in Nepal historically. That also gave rise to this anti-India sentiment, because India's support to democratic forces was projected by the ruling elites of the time as being anti-Nepal, and they took a lot of corresponding actions in order to neutralize this. So these are some of the reasons I think why there is this anti-India sentiment. And another factor that I've always felt is also that there are a lot of close cultural and civilizational links and similarities that bind our 2 countries together. But I think this also raises issues about identity. And countries try and define themselves differently. There has to be something unique about a national identity. And so I think this is another factor that has sometimes caused certain complications in the relationship. I would only remind your viewers and listeners about some of the remarks that former Prime Minister Oli had made about Lord Ram being born in Nepal and so on. These are some of the complicating factors. And on the question of interference, as I say in my book, leadership is a very lonely position. There are very few people that the leaders of any country trust or can talk to frankly, openly. But, they're also human beings. They also need to consult people. They have doubts. They want to know whether a decision they're making is the right decision or not. And sometimes, as a foreign envoy, if you develop a relationship of trust and confidence, then you exchange views on some sensitive issues. I don't think I would call it interference. It's not as if, X is telling Y you have to do this, otherwise consequences will follow. It's more in terms of very friendly consultation. And it happens, I wouldn't say one side is instrumental or the other side. Yeah, it's a mutual understanding of both sides involved. In terms of capacity building, human resource development, of course, India has been very, very large in terms of the support. And India offers support to Nepal, not only at the school level. India has a large number of, during my time, I think 3,000 scholarships for Nepalese students studying in Nepali schools in class 11 and 12. And we were giving the brightest students these scholarships and encouraging them to go on to higher studies either in Nepal or in India. And then, of course, at the undergraduate, postgraduate level, at the PhD level, a lot of scholarships. And in addition to that, of course, we have this large Indian Technical and Economic Cooperation Program, under which very, very large number of people from Nepal have been trained in technical areas. And we've also sent Indian professors and others to Nepali universities. So certainly this is a very major aspect of the relationship between the two countries. And even more than the government scholarships is the fact that there are thousands of Nepali students that still study in India, in Indian universities and colleges on a private basis. They're paying for their studies. And everyone says that a lot of Nepalese students are now going to Australia or England and other countries, China. But there are also a very large number of students from Nepal that are studying in India. And that is also a factor that should not be discounted. And lastly on this, there are many institutions that have been established in Nepal. For instance, the medical colleges in Nepal that not only provide training to Nepalese students, but a lot of foreign students and a lot of Indian students. There are many Indian students studying, for the medicine profession in Nepal. Now, on the other issue, on the new vistas, I was thinking about this. What could the new vistas in the relationship be? And, to my mind, the relationship is very dynamic and obviously depends on the circumstances prevailing at any point in time. So the new vistas have to, in a sense, relate to the Nepal of today, the India of today, the geopolitical context in which we live. And it is this that will determine the new vistas and the manner in which the relationship will progress. This is not to say that what we've been doing in the past suddenly is ended and we start from a blank slate. Certainly not. It's all incremental. But clearly the circumstances of the present, the kind of government you have in Nepal, the kind of aspirations, I think Professor Muni referred to, of the young people, what is happening in India will obviously impact on Nepal. What is happening between the US and China is impacting on Nepal, as we see in these huge debates on MCC and BRI and so on. So obviously all this is going to impact on the new vistas in the relationship. And I think one of the most important things I feel is, Nepal is going through a huge political churn. And I sense, and this is a growing feeling I have, of a certain disenchantment with the political process. You see this in terms of the fall in the number of people turning out to vote. You see this in the fact that completely new political formations are experiencing huge support from the voters, something that was unimaginable. And the mainstream established political parties that have been there for such a long time are faring quite badly. And there also seems to be a feeling that, that the Nepalese people, and especially the young people, are looking for new leadership. So this is obviously going to impact in a huge way in terms of what's happening in Nepal. And, just in our own region, we have seen post-COVID what happened in Sri Lanka. So I think this is a wake-up call really for leaders across the region to listen to what the street is saying, what the people are saying, and respond to that effectively and promptly. And failure to do so will only bring bigger problems later on. So I think for India, it is very important to step up our engagement with the new political forces and the youth. Of course, this does not mean you reduce your engagement with established political parties, but it's very, very important that we reach out to the parties, the leaders, and the civil societies that are going to play such an important role in the future. So I think that is one aspect that India really needs to focus on in its relationship with Nepal. Secondly, we talk a lot about the civilization and cultural connect, and that is critical. It's very important. I mean, that is the unique aspect of the relationship between the two countries. But as Professor Muni also said, I think you have to anchor the relationship in the future in terms of what our aspirational people want, what the youth of our two countries want. And I think what the youth of the two countries want is a better life. They want, they want a better economic situation, better standard of living, better infrastructure. So the anchor of our relationship really has to be economic issues. And, Professor Muni referred to connectivity, hydropower. These are obviously critical issues. And a lot is happening in these issues. And I'm very glad to say that hydropower trade, for instance, is become a very major issue. Much more needs to be done, but at least we've made a big step forward. And once the trade with Bangladesh also opens, you have sub-regional cooperation, which is a whole new dimension. Some of the issues I wanted to raise to what Professor Muni said is this whole digital payments economy, what is known as the digital substack in India, where we have this unique ID, we have mobile telephony, and we have all these apps, universal payments apps. And this is transformational. This kind of financial reform, if we can do it in our sub-region, in our region, I think it's going to have a transformational effect. Secondly, I think, we talk about hydropower cooperation, but when I was looking at Pancheshwar, over the last 20 or 30 years, I saw that our technical people were telling us that the water flows in the Himalayan rivers and certainly in the Mahakali River are reducing over a period of time. So climate change is tangibly going to affect Nepal and India in terms of reduced water flows, hence reduced energy generation, and of course, reduced water for availability for various things. So climate change is a big issue. And, we look at it really as a global issue, but I think increasingly we need to look at it as also a bilateral issue, as a sub-regional issue. And we need to go forward on things like green economy, renewable energy, and, everything that we can do for a sustainable and resilient infrastructure. Resilient because we've all experienced the earthquake of 2015. So I think these are some of the new areas. E-mobility. I mean, Nepal is blessed with large generational capacity for energy. So e-mobility, Professor Muni said, why don't you use this electricity in Nepal? So e-mobility is such a major area where I think India and Nepal can work with. And of course, we talk about these regional supply chains. If China and Vietnam have a supply chain, why can't we have a regional supply chain between India, Bangladesh, Bhutan, and Nepal, for instance? And, I think some of our trade and industry bodies should cooperate on this issue and see what kinds of supply chains we can develop. Sub-regional integration I've already referred to. So I don't want to see the relationship only as India-Nepal bilateral. I think we really increasingly need to look at it as sub-regional, and whether it's hydropower, whether it's even management of water resources. I mean, can't we talk about management of river basins? Because most of the rivers flow from Nepal to India and on to Bangladesh, and the same thing with Bhutan, India, and Bangladesh. So I think, these are some of the new ways in which we need to start looking at the relationship. Of course, there are a lot of outstanding issues. I saw in some of the questions about the boundary issue, the 1950 treaty, and obviously all these issues are there and have to be dealt with. But these issues have been there for a long time. So I was really focusing more on the new vistas that we really need to explore. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Ray. May I now invite Major General Binod Basnet. Major General Binod Basnet retired from the Nepali army and is well decorated with exposures to politics, diplomacy, and security. His liking is geopolitics and strategy thinking. He was part of UNDPA as a resource person. He participates in various intellectual discussions, particularly on Southeast and Southeast Asia. He is currently associated with Rangsit University in Bangkok. General Basnet, let me share a few questions that can shape your remark. Like, how do you look at Nepal-India strategic engagement in recent times? And what role does India play in modernization and capacity building of Nepal army? How do you look at the role of Gorkha regiment in cementing ties between two countries? And what is Nepal's stand on India's Agnipath scheme? Why did it raise concern here in Nepal? Over to you, sir. Just a second, we have to make him co-host. So you can unmute yourself.
Unmute, God.
All right, now it's working now. Okay. Thank you, Dr. Pramod, and thank you, Nice, for having me in this important panel this afternoon. And so, I mean, this is a very important issue that we talk about Nepal-India relationship. But one thing is there is a need to acknowledge that the geostrategic environment is altering, not just in South Asia, but the whole world. Therefore, it is very important for us to understand and to observe how the shaping of the age-old and bold relationships for better and preferable destiny to our two countries. So, I mean, so Nepal and India has come to these circumstances that is volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguity, with harmonies and discords, but with discords that have revealed less sweets and showers, but commonalities is what is driving our relationship forward to the destiny where we live in harmony. So I will frame my presentations to find answers to the 4 questions that Dr. Joshua just put forward. And the questions are related to political diplomacy and security disciplines. So I will focus on 3 subject matters. 1 is the geostrategic apprehension, 2 on the foreign policy, and 3rd is the security relationship. But most important is how do we together strengthen Nepal and India ties. So, I mean, coming into the geostrategic apprehension, the security architecture of South Asia with Indian perspective is changing. And it changes, uncovers a discomfort. I mean, questioning the existing and imminent narratives, leaving behind the past with lessons. Therefore, when we discuss Nepal-India relationship, a whole gambit of interests and political maneuverings by great and powers cannot be undertaken. So with these engagements, the following needs to be considered. 1 is the geopolitical trends in the international pitch with regional powers or China and India's expansion. So in the international pitch, there is a diplomatic maneuvering on the expansion of G7 or to G10 or 10 democracies, one of them India, amid the pandemic. As a G2 is not expected to be in action, G7 will play on devising policies with the United States, the European Union, and the NATO advancing to our region, Indo-Pacific regions, with several geopolitical theories, like Bring Back a Better World, which deals with ecology, economy, and infrastructure connectivity. Second is the China's 100th anniversary. I mean, it's centennial of the Chinese Communist Party with strong message that China will no longer be bullied, oppressed, or subjugated by foreign countries. Third is the militarizations and the development of infrastructure by both China and India in the Himalayas and the maritime. Fourth, India's rise in engagements has expanded to West Asia, East Asia, and Far East Asia with Act East policy, with Far West policy, etc., and does not only remain in the immediate neighborhood, though neighborhood policy remains at the core of Nepal and India relationship. So China is expanding her cooperation in South Asia, shaping South Asia as a bridge to the Indian Ocean, an alternative for connectivity and national security. So the 5 states in the northern borders and joining China along continental Himalayas and 5 nations along the Indian Oceans will continue to be of interest to the powers involved, particularly China, India, and the United States. One of the fundamentals of India and China relationship is politics of space, with political interest, resources management, and security leverages for stability, with economy as a priority, as well as the shift in people's perception. So there are 4 geopolitical theories that has geostrategic and geoeconomic implications through Belt and Road Initiative and political economic security persuasion. One is in West South Asia, China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. The second is in the center of the Himalayas, the Trans-Himalayan Multidimensional Connectivity Network. And the third is in the east, Bangladesh, China, India, Myanmar Corridor, or the China-Myanmar Corridor. So unruffled with the geopolitical theories are impacts of COVID-19 in the whole region. In the West, Afghanistan, the crossroads of South Asia, Central Asia, and the Persian Gulf. With the Taliban, more indirect diplomatic engagement with the 5 border states of Afghanistan by bigger powers. In the center, political instability in Nepal, institutionalization of corruption and misgovernance. And second is the border issues between Bhutan and China. In the east is the military coup and the martial law in Myanmar, I mean, compromising to the principles of the values of democracy. So on the bilateral front, the 12-point agreement between the 7-party alliance and the Maoists in Delhi did not come with a strategy and the visualization of the upcoming geostrategic surroundings. And the submissions of the Eminent Persons Group's report with suggestions to replace the 1950 Treaty of Peace and Friendship and also regulate the open border, which is the foundation of in Nepal-India special relationship. So the alternations of the political system following the convincing, particularly the Nepali Congress, to trail the Maoist agenda to a republic, federal and secular, without comprehending the stakeholders behind hand, the Maoist leadership, and the main source and elements of national power, the people. Now I come to my second part of the presentation on the foreign policy. So Nepal and India have always stood with each other on their political journeys from independence of India to Nepal's declaration as a secular federal republic. So while reading the minds on diplomacy and Indian policies towards Nepal, we can see 2 important subject matters pointing to the future of bilateral relationship that stand out. The first is the India's observations of China's growing influence in Nepal, which is believed to be well supported by the communist parties of both Nepal and China. Second, on the contrary, is the important example of people-to-people relationship, cultural, traditional practices that form the foundation of special Nepal and India bond. Also visible is the analysis of the effects of the 12-point agreement, the current relationship between Nepal and India, and the new geopolitical realities surrounding the two countries. So there is also strong indications that past policies orchestrators in Nepal and India also observed responsible for aggravating instability without proper policies. So picking up on these points, it is important to look into the loopholes that senior political leaders, political parties, and the system of governments in Nepal leave open to further worsening Nepal and India ties, not only political, but also people-to-people level. So while aspirations for functional democracy in Nepal leads to thrive, opportunity to resolve and rebuild strong Nepal-India ties are visible, but policy makers need to act. So what are the commonalities? One, civilizational connections, people-to-people bond that we very much talk about, open border, and special arrangements like the defense relationship for defense diplomacy, and the monetary arrangements. So what are the resources that we have and how you use it? Second is the strategic planning, the deficit of strategic planning. Third is the regional outlook. And fourth is the security perception. How do we see today's reality of security? So what is wrong in our relationship? Lack of national foreign policy for both Nepal and India. It is more driven by personalities and who directs politics and policies, but always short-lived, lacking strategic outlook, like the 12-point agreement. And I agree with what Dr. Mooney said, that it is not India does not have a policy. It is, I stress on the fact. So what is the policy deficit there? For India, relationship is described not by national foreign policies, but whose they? Is it the RAW, the intelligence community? It is the law enforcement force? Or is it the defense force? Or is it the other influential intellectual organizations that has influence on day-to-day government? For Nepal, it is geographically influenced perception. So the policy perception in these cities, in Kathmandu, in the capital, is very different to what is it in the east or the west of Nepal. So that's the perception of the people. So the people see it very differently. So when we look at, so the government of Nepal and the topmost political leaders are the driving force for policies, not the national strategic policy that country needs. So these are the main constituencies to what Nepal and India relationship is today. Primarily, inconsistent Indian policy is paving way for governments in power to engage or intervene in their own philosophical theory and reasoning, imprisoning Nepal-India rapport from time to time. This is not to stress that the Nepal policy makers are truthful and flawless. Nepal-India special relations has reached the lowest after a little more than half a century, with various acknowledged facts that I talked about. So to bring in the constructive headways and wind up instability in Nepal-India relationship in the new geopolitical reality, 4 positions must be apparent. 1, India's foreign policy towards Nepal should be well spelled out versus the policies as convenience. Second, strengthening people-to-people relationship through cultural bondings. And third, engagement in development efforts to solace the people dwelling in the most expensive country in South Asia, with operational foundations for strategic connectivity. Finally, to emphasize on a collective strategies to address common security challenges. India's policy in South Asia is based on neighborhood first, but Nepal-India relationship goes further, not just because of proximity. It goes to culture, people-to-people relationship, but the two countries have marched together in search for identity, inclusiveness, and values based on democratic system. So this leads me to the last part of my presentation on what security relationship is. It is a military to military relationship. It is law enforcement cooperation. It is intelligence community coordination. And Dr. Jaishwal asked to talk about the Agnipath. Let me just take a little bit of time on to see what the Agnipath and the repercussion that will have in our relationship. So Agnipath is about defense diplomacy that has a distinct setup. It has domestic, regional, and international setups for peace, against peace, for development. So trends of defense diplomacy is changing its discourse. So what is to India and what is it to Nepal? It is just after 4 years that 75% returnees will add to the unemployment list. It is not about a vulnerability of being misused by unwanted elements. So these 2 points seem to be in the minds of the Nepalese policymakers. But what I see about Agnipath, it has strategic bearings. It is not just unemployment, employment. It is not about 75% coming back and what do we do with them. It is about political trust. It is geopolitics. It is economics. It is diplomacy. It is employment. It is people-to-people connectivity. And it is the alteration that the nation is not prepared for. What I mean to say is Nepal is not prepared for the changes. Though I should acknowledge that when Nepal and India both knew that there was work on the new recruitment scheme, and they coming together to talk about how the Gorkha regiment, or let's say the Nepali Gorkhas recruitment should take place. So the absence of that is one of the main reasons why we are, arguing about this matter. So the Agnipath is being debated in Nepal, but India as well. So the military practice that is undergoing is in developed countries like China, EU countries, Russia, UK, United States. India is following the global trends, but what is it to Nepal? So Nepal's youths have opportunities, they support their families, provided good education to their siblings, in addition, bring approximately Nepalese rupees 60, 70 crores to Nepal in the forms of pensions and other benefits. Many questions arise when almost 60 lakhs Nepalese are temporarily migrated, some say 70 lakhs, for jobs in India. It is employment which adds to more than 20% for the GDP. So the economic conditions are lowering, seeing the restrictions in licenses to import foreign goods. It is in the interest of Nepal until an alternative measures are formed to go ahead with the recruitment plan. It is for a broader interest of both the nations. So two choices. One, India should not look for Indian Gorkhas as an alternative. Second, India should view it as a long-term relationship, should open recruitment in their border towns. The other point is, Nepal, in the other hand, should adopt policies that will help the returned skilled manpower and the financial arrangements for food security and building of small manufacturing factories. So there could be a request to the Indian Defense Army, the Indian military, on what skills are actually needed with the financial support they get back. So that could be a method of getting the financial resources and the skills to build or to enhance the place where they're settled in. And the other point is there is a big lobby of servings and veterans that assist Nepal. And those are from the Gorkha regiments. Where in the world do we see a foreign officer upholding Nepal with saying Jai Nepal? So this is where our military, Indian Army and Nepal Army relationship stands. So that group is a very influential group in India, which looks for the good of Nepal-India relationship. And so can we imagine how it will be when the Agnipath scheme does not move forward? What is the absence going to mean is very different, difficult to comprehend. So, so my suggestion, once again, I reiterate that India should look at for a better, a wider visualization, and not stick to what what the policymakers or the politicians in Nepal think about. I think the recruitment in the border towns should start now, so that this plays in the long run for better security relationships. So with this, I think I should end. I think I have taken more than 15 minutes. And once again, let me stress for a better and a preferable destiny is: one, strategic connectivity, new security arrangements, strategic planning for the use of resources, supporting Nepal's strategic development efforts, and bringing the cultural and religious bonding, and finally, security diplomacy. Thank you, Dr. Jaiswal.
Thank you, Vinod Basnet. May I now invite Dr. Nihar Nayak for his remarks. Dr. Nihar Nayak is a research fellow at Institute of Defense Studies and Analysis, New Delhi. He has his PhD in international politics from Jawaharlal Nehru University, and he was visiting fellow to the Peace Research Institute, Oslo, in June 2006 and July 2007. He did a special course on peace research at the International Summer School of Oslo in 2007, as I said, and he has been visiting faculty at Center for Study of Nepal, Faculty of Social Science, Banaras Hindu University since 2011. He was guest faculty at Lal Bahadur Shastri National Academy of Administration, Mussoorie, and he has both national and international publications on his credit, including the recent book Strategic Himalayas, Republican Nepal and External Powers. Dr. Nayak, you may focus some of these questions, like how do you look at Indian development projects in Nepal? What is India's role in Nepal's economic transformation? Connectivity is of prime importance for Nepal. Is connectivity with Nepal India's priority as well? How do you look at, why do Indian development projects often get politicized in Nepal, especially the issues related to water sharing and hydropower projects? And what is the prospect of India, Nepal, Bangladesh power trade? How do you see it progressing in next 5 to 10 years? Over to you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Pramod, for the invitation, and my compliments to NICE for holding such an important event just before upcoming visit of Prime Minister of Nepal to India. The 4 questions you have posed, I think I would like to focus on that. As you know, my previous panelists have almost covered most of the issues, both directly and indirectly. There could be some repetitions in my presentation. The first question you have asked that how do you look at the Indian development project in Nepal? My answer to this question is that look, Indian development projects has immensely contributed to basically strengthening bilateral relationship between Nepal and India, and at the same time basically constant economic growth in Nepal since 1950 onwards. And what India has gained out of by undertaking this development project, basically a huge goodwill and trust. No, basically dealing with a country which is not which is not basically a lot of asymmetry between Nepal and India is there. And what is the mutual benefit of this development project is basically the confidence building. As Ambassador Ray has mentioned that there's asymmetry in the relationship, a lot of complex in the relationship. So this continuous and consistent investment in the development projects and programs in Nepal, India has generated huge amount of goodwill, and there's confidence, mutual confidence has been there. It depends upon actually how one is going to interpret that India in Nepal relations. It's a different issue. But if you go by the fact or go by the statistics, India has been substantially contributing in Nepal's development journey. And if you see, India has been the first country which has been basically focused in the infrastructure development in Nepal, as per basically Nepal's requirement as proposed by government of Nepal that time in the early 50s and 60s. Government of India has undertaken and developed hugely in the mega project, starting from the fifth highway, which was constructed in 1952, and currently the Tribhuvan International Airport, and almost all other 11 airports India contributed, developed under this scheme. So India has a huge development, contribution in the particularly in the infrastructure development in Nepal. There's one, I think Professor Muni has mentioned while presenting one thing, that why Government of India has been not focusing more on the mega projects. You see, if you see, Government of India's development programs has been divided in three sections. One, there was a period when India's development programs was named as a Indian Aid Mission, and that aid mission was changed to basically India Operation Mission in 1966, and then onwards, after in again 2003, the Government of India focused basically and shifted from the mega projects to a small development projects. And obviously there is a strong reason behind that why Government of India did that in 2003. And if you recall that in 2003 was a period when Nepal was undergoing a serious political violence, and the Maoists were basically targeting Indian projects, and because they have been identified India as they are basically a prime enemy, and is basically a country which is going to basically interfering in Nepal's internal affairs. They are exploiting Nepalese resources. So obviously, because of the ideological factor, the Maoists are targeting Indian projects, starting from the basically 2000 till 2003, they started targeting Indian projects. So Government of India, when all these activities was going on, and when Government of India witnessed that these mega projects are not going to be completed because of frequent Maoist attack on these projects, then the two things may basically happen. And basically, one is basically when Government of India failed to meeting those deadlines related to the mega projects, then a lot of negativity started coming from the domestic side, from the Nepal side, particularly India, that people started questioning India's intentions, India's capability, India's capacity. So people thought that no, India must be doing it deliberately, but they didn't know that is because of the Maoist actor, which was basically halting India's progress in basically completing these mega projects. And the second program, another factor could be that why these mega projects could not be completed on time, or delayed or deferred for a certain period of time, because of the, as you know, the Maoists are controlling the entire union in Nepal, and they also control the major national highways and infrastructure sectors in Nepal. And also there are also a lot of problem. There's a huge amount of electricity problem that time in Nepal also, because currently it has a balanced electricity production, but that time it was not there. And there are also a lot of challenges basically collecting raw material to completing those development products. So given these 3 to 4 factors, that Government of India and another factor was basically, since these projects are not we were not meeting the deadlines. There is India's visibility, despite spending huge amount of money in those mega projects. India's visibility was missing, particularly in the rural areas and where the projects are not undertaken. So, considering these factors, Government of India decided in 2003 to shifting from the not focusing more on the mega projects and shifting to the small development projects, particularly focusing on the education sector, health, sanitization, and other, like particularly in the district level, maybe at the maybe at the rural and the village level, they started projecting on that. And so far, if you'll see, since 1950 onwards, Government of India has undertaken 474 small development projects. Out of that, 90 projects, all these projects are in different stages actually. 90 projects are basically almost completed. 240 there are then on the construction level, and other in the proposal and the initial stage, basically construction stage. So most of the projects have been continuously going on, particularly and hugely it is benefiting to the Nepalese people. At the same time, there are 36 mega projects has been identified. So far only 3 projects have been completed, and many projects are still under construction. So obviously India as a first developer and a country which is contributing development. So obviously it has a huge stake in the particularly and contribution to the economic growth and economic journey of Nepal. The second question is, what is India's role in economic transformation in Nepal? Again, like we have been said that it has been discussed earlier that India has been hugely contributed to the democratic journey of Nepal and democratization of democratic process in Nepal. Obviously, in the particular economic transformation, again, India has a huge contribution. I have identified 10 to 12 bilateral arrangement which has been directly and indirectly contributing to this, basically India's Nepal's basically economic transformation, Nepal's economic transformation since 1950 onwards. Obviously, as I have discussed already, basically the infrastructure development projects or mega projects starting from the road connectivity, Prithvi highway, then airports, integrated checkposts, feeder roads, then train lines, then hospitals, education institutions, and hydro projects initially. Obviously, because India had a lot of challenges, particularly developing hydro projects like Kosi, Gandaki, although it was a purpose was a bit different. It was a multi-purpose projects, but India had a lot of challenges in terms of gathering resources and also technology also, because India as a newly independent country in the 50s and 60s didn't have sufficient technology to basically developing mega projects what today India has in that sector. And second is basically the non-reciprocity, because in 1996 trade and treaty, Government of India assured Nepal to basically promote industrial development in that country through basically on the grant basis, basically a non-reciprocity to Nepalese products in Indian market. So that basically as a landlord country that huge benefited to Nepal since 1996 onwards. And the third element is basically the currency pegging. As you know, recently Sri Lanka Sri Lanka had a very serious financial crisis, and maybe the other countries had similar kind of economic crisis. The Bhutan had a kind of similar crisis, but the Bhutan and Nepal, they did fairly better in the post-COVID period. Perhaps one factor could be the basically currency pegging with India, I think, because since that so that basically helped them to basically stabilize their economy when the crisis become a bit critical. And the third is basically the consistent and the very consistent and constant energy supply from India, as exactly when you can again refer about the Sri Lankan case. Sri Lanka had a huge energy crisis in the post-COVID period, but interestingly and fortunately, Nepal and Bhutan didn't have that kind of crisis, as because of India's continuous assurances and guaranteed energy flow, particularly fossil fuel flow like petroleum products and diesels and kerosene to Nepal. Then integrated checkpost. So far, the Government of India has developed these projects under development assistance. Then there are 4 ICPs have been proposed, and 2 are already operational, and 2 are under construction. As started Nepalganj and Bharwa has been started. Then obviously there are two transit seaports. Government of India has offered to Nepal for third country trade. Then obviously the national treatment to Nepalese citizens in India, they can have their jobs in any sector of India and undertaking commercial activities in India. So that has been contributing hugely to basically bringing remittances to Nepal. And then India has been one of the largest and highest volume in the foreign direct investment in Nepal. But currently, although it has come down a little bit since 2013 onwards, but still there has been quite substantial. It's a 33% and roughly around US$ 500 million. And also India is also has one advantage for Nepal is it is the most immediate market, particularly exporting and marketizing in Nepalese product in Indian market. And at the same time, India is also the largest trading partner of Nepal also. And now Government of India under the current for the last 7-8 years, Government of India has been focusing more on basically digital connectivity like RuPay and UPI. All this thing has been introduced that will facilitate further economic cooperation between both the countries. And also Nepal also taking huge advantage of cooperation under SAPTA and taking advantage of Indian market. And the last but not the least, I think the most important sector which has been coming off recently, although we are a bit late, but still it is going to be very promising sector, that is the power sector, where Nepal Electricity Authority has been admitted that they have benefited, they got profit of around roughly 11 billion Nepalese rupees last year in 2021 and 2022 by selling powers to Indian market. So these are the elements which has been hugely contributing to basically strengthening that economic and helping the economic transformation of Nepal. The second question is basically connectivity is of primary importance to Nepal. Is connectivity with Nepal India's priority as well? Of course, it's basically a priority sector because connectivity has been that is the reason, and because India believes that we like the Sabka Saath and Sabka Vikas. Although it has been a motto now when the BJP government came to power, but it has been basically a motto. I think it has been there, an undeclared motto. I can say it has been there since 1950 onwards, because it was the India which started the first national highway, the Prithvi highway in Nepal, and first airport and other highways also India constructed. So connectivity was always in the India's priority. At the same time, that's why Government of India has focused more the integrated checkpost, and under the development programs, Government of India also trying to upgrading all the railway connectivity, all old existing railway connectivity, and Government of India also assured basically connecting Roxol Kathmandu railway connectivity. So railway, roadways, and currently also there are 3 inland waterways are also assured from the Government of India side. So these are the priority sector. And apart from that, Government of India is also assured 27 trading points for basically both bilateral trade purposes and third country purposes. Apart from that, Nepal also can take advantage of the arrangement under PBIN, Motor Vehicle Agreement, and also the BIMSTEC arrangement, regional and sub-regional arrangement for their own benefits. Coming to your the third question, why do Indian development projects often get politicized in Nepal, especially the issue related to water sharing and hydropower projects? I think this is not the only water projects. Basically, almost most of the projects has been politicized, starting from the constructing of highways or maybe airports and other infrastructure projects. It's maybe because of the domestic political structure in Nepal, mostly responsible for that. And it has not happened only in India. It has happened with China also. It has been projects undertaken under by other countries in Nepal also. So I think, and even Nepali government's projects are also halted and has been politicized because of a different reason also. So it is not only India projects, but still, as you have identified that India projects are halted, obviously the first reason is basically the land acquisition and environmental clearances. It has been, I have observed that most of the Indian projects has undertaken mostly because of the non-cooperation from the Nepalese bureaucratic side, maybe the the ruling political party side that time, that particular time. So land acquisition has been the major projects and environmental clearances. The second action is the absence of a basically apolitical bureaucracy. Now, often I have seen that the Nepalese bureaucracy has been ideologically basically influenced or support a particular ideological groups or political parties in Nepal. So when that political party takes some kind of policy, have a kind of against India, so that bureaucracy generally they follow that and we behave like very different way, and they become non-cooperative in basically clearing a particular project. Then perception in India, basically it has been basically a starting from the monarchical time also, and also it was again supported by basically communist and then followed by the Maoist, that India is trying to basically explore the natural resources of Nepal. So that kind of the mindset and the thinking has also been affected the development projects. Then poor compensation and rehabilitation policy of Nepal. At this moment, there is no clear-cut rehabilitation and compensation policy all those people who have been displaced due to mega projects in Nepal. Then the most important factor, I think, the political instability. As you know, Nepal has been, despite having a new constitution in 2000, we can discuss about two sections like in 1950 to 2015, but still in 2015 they have a new constitution, but so far there is no political stability. There is no guarantee that Nepal will have any kind of political stability in future also, because I see that the instability is the only stability in Nepal. So the frequent government changes are also brought out frequent policy changes in Nepal. So that has affected the development projects, and particularly in the foreign direct investment in Nepal also. Then ideologically motivated local resistances, particularly like the Maoists they did during the Maoist insurgency. Then obviously UML also, cadres also, they undertake a lot of protest against Indian projects also. Then there is a strong labor union also. There is another factor I have discussed, mentioned earlier. Then poor infrastructure and absence of basically kind of basically raw material and the electricity has been the other factors also that's been delayed the project. The issue has been the politicized. And I'll end my this section presentation by saying one example that recently that Tarai fast track section 6 road, which was Afghan India was one of the major bidder, and was the number 2 bidder. Finally didn't get through. When it just became successful bidder in the technical level was cancelled, and it couldn't to make it in the final level, because the politicization of the basically the entire tendering and bidding process in Nepal. So this is a classic example. One can say that how Nepal, India's projects has been politicized in Nepal because of the different factor. Then the last question is that what are the prospects of India, Nepal, Bangladesh power trade? How do you see it progressing in the next 5 years? I think it is in a negotiation stage. Still negotiations are on. I think, as you know, there are 13 transmission lines are currently operational between Nepal and India, and there are 2 transmission lines operating between India and Bangladesh, and 1 is under a proposed level. The 2, I'll focus on the Bangladesh-India transmission line, because that is the key while India will basically doing trading with Bangladesh, because the Berhampur and Veramara transmission line, which is between Bangladesh and India, is currently basically supplying 500 megawatt electricity from India to Bangladesh. So it is a full, it doesn't have any extra capacity to basically it is transmitting electricity from India to Bangladesh, and it is running in full capacity. Second is that another one is Komila and that Surajnagar, that sector. Again, it is a 400 kV DC line. It is also running in full capacity. It doesn't have extra capacity to basically transmitting electricity from India to Bangladesh for Nepal. So what government of India at this moment has assured, recently there was a joint secretary level meeting, energy secretary level meeting in Jaipur in February 2023, where government of India has assured that they will help basically facilitate electric export from Nepal to Bangladesh around 40 to 50 megawatt, given basically the gap they will find between these two in the 2 transmission lines. But once that Katihar and Parbatipur transmission line will operationalized, which will be around 765 kV capacity, then Nepal will get a full, basically as a full platform, basically to export electricity from Nepal to Bangladesh. So I think there is a substantial progress in that, and if you see the recent meeting, Nepalese authorities have been expressed their full confidence and satisfaction in the bilateral meeting that the energy cooperation is progressing quite substantially, and Nia's profit around Nepali rupees 11 billion Nepali rupees is, I think, the example of that how the successful that cooperation has been so far. But apart from that, there are certain challenges, there are certain shortcomings that needs to be addressed. So it is that issue is not that simple, that is because of that. Often I have seen that Nepalese media, they have been blamed India, that India is not cooperating in the transmission that energy export from Nepal to Bangladesh. There are certain challenges and that needs to be identified and that should be addressed. There are three challenges I have addressed. One is basically infrastructure challenges, because the transmission line, it was discussed in the last energy secretary level meeting, that the transmission line except the Dalkebar that corridor, that none of the Nepalese transmission line are capable to basically export more than 500 megawatt or 1000 megawatt electricity from Nepal to India, or again Nepal to Bangladesh. So the infrastructure challenges are very much there, and the capacity enhancement is must. Then policy and regularity framework that has to be finalized, because whether what kind of model they are going to follow, whether bilateral model or BBIN platform or BIMSTEC platform, what kind of modality, what kind of framework has to be, and that has to be decided, and nothing has been decided in this regard. And the most importantly, it has been often highlighted from the Government of India side that technical and mechanical challenges, because basically there is no synchronization of basically technology in the Nepal side and India side. So harmonization of frequency standardization, data transformation, all these details has to be worked out, because the preparation in Nepal side has not been so much satisfactory despite repeated reminder and discussion from the India side regarding the improvement of capacity in the Nepal side. So these are the issues has to be basically has to be finalized before undertaking this kind of mechanism, and this trade to be happen between Nepal and Bangladesh. And the last and not least, again, basically dispute resolution mechanism has to be finalized between three countries, because it could be a trilateral agreement. So far there is no such institutional mechanism that's to be finalized. Otherwise, overall, if you see the negotiation and the work has been progressed quite substantially over a period of time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for your remarks. May I now invite Kamaldev Bhattrai. Kamaldev Bhattrai is Kathmandu-based journalist and writer who currently serves as editor at the Annapurna Express. He was New Delhi bureau chief of Kantipur Media Group, Nepal's largest media house from 2016 to 2018. As a senior political correspondent of the Kathmandu Post and the Himalayan Times, he closely followed Nepal's peace process and constitution drafting process. He has written a book about Nepal's peace and constitution drafting process titled Transition from 12-Point Understanding to Constitution Promulgation. He teaches journalism and mass communication in colleges and involved in different media research. Mr. Bhattrai, you can maybe focus your remark on these questions. Like, as you have worked as a journalist even in India, how do you perceive India-Nepal relations as a journalist? And what kind of content about India is important for Nepali media, and the content about Nepal is important for Indian media? Like, basically, what kind of issues are widely covered in their press about each other? Third, what is the perception about Nepal among Indian journalists? How well informed they are when it comes to Nepal, though we are very near in terms of we're proximate. Lastly, is there an engagement between the media houses and journalists of both the countries? If what is the nature and how effective is it in shaping the ties between two countries? Over to you. Please unmute yourself.
Thank you, Dr. Pramod, for having me in this very important program. As previous speakers have covered almost all issues, bilateral issues, I would like to put my views from the journalistic point of view As far as your first question is concerned, as a journalist, I have pointed out some points that shows the current trajectory of bilateral relations. The first point is that over the past few years, despite ups and downs at the political level, there has been good progress in the connectivity and development project, as previous speakers, Dr. Niyar Naik has presented the details of such connectivity and other development projects. Some of the vital connectivity and development projects are that cross-border petroleum pipeline, Ulaki Road, and there has been notable progress in the proposed Kathmandu-Roxwell Railway, ICP, and other things. And the encouraging sign is that the new projects are in pipeline to enhance the financial and economic integrations between two countries and to push the e-commerce. I think this is the new initiatives that two countries are taking that needs both countries need to push this plan without any delay. Obviously, as previous speaker says, that we can see a lot of progress on the energy cooperations. Long-standing pending hydropower projects have gathered the momentum, and they are making the good progress. But despite all these, there are some bilateral issues related to power trade that needs to be sorted out without any delay. Another trend I have seen is that the engagement at the different levels of society has increased in the recent years. In the past, India's interference in the internal political affairs was one of the major issues that always contributed for disturbing to sour the relationship. But over the past few years, at least publicly, I have not heard much about the India's interference in the internal political affairs. But again, if we go to the media reports over the past few months, the issue is again coming out publicly. Another trend I have seen is that mainly after over the past 5-6 years, there is a growing perception in Kathmandu that the influence of RSS has increased in India's Nepal policy, and it is unsure. I'm unsure whether it is a reality. Another trend I have seen is that with China-US rivalry and growing Chinese and American concerns and activism in Kathmandu, it seems that New Delhi is more concerned about the increased activities of the China and US. Despite progress on development partnership, there are some differences between two countries on how to prioritize the issues. For example, Nepal's priority is that the issues related to EPG 1950s treaties and border issues should be tackled as soon as possible. And and political parties are pressure from the people to take up these issues with Indian side so that we can resolve these issues without any delay. But it seems that it is not in the priority of the India, and India is trying to focus on development partnership over these long-standing disputes. On the second question that you have said, what kind of content about India is important for Nepali media? Obviously, to enhance the bilateral relation, we need to develop content that guides our politicians and policymakers on how we can explore new areas of cooperations, because the media coverage is dominated by the same issues over the several years that previous speaker spoke, and I also briefly highlight here. So we need new content and new issues on what could be the other areas of the cooperations. We need to explore the new areas. But the problem is that despite being close, I always say that despite being so close, there is lack of understanding. There is a lack of understanding among journalists. both in New Delhi and Kathmandu. There are very few journalists in New Delhi who better understand Nepal and vice versa. The second question is that the perception about Nepal among Indian journalists. I see that the problem with not about all journalists, but almost all Indian journalists who cover foreign affairs see Nepal through the eyes of their Indian government, and very few of them make critical news, or few of them highlight the issues that both government needs to resolve. If we, as a journalist, if we fail, or if we don't raise the critical and the priority issues in the media, I believe we cannot make the bilateral relations cordial. So, and another problem is that the Indian journalists are seeing Nepal, they are not closely following Nepal's domestic political issues, Nepal's engagement with other powers, and they are just following, except few, they are just following Nepal on the occasional issues. For example, when there is a big political movement in Kathmandu, or when our Prime Minister visits India, or Indian Prime Minister visits Nepal. Another question is that the engagement between two media houses of the two countries, I don't think there has been much engagement. There are few engagement or collaborations that some Indian news agencies have collaborated with some media houses in Kathmandu. There is not strong collaborations in the content sharing, I think, which is must to understand to each other. As both, the problem is that both Indian and Nepali media don't report much about Nepal or India, or they don't originally produce the report either about the Nepal or about the India, but we rely on the media created content created by the Western news agencies and Western media, and opinions both in Kathmandu and New Delhi as shaped accordingly. What I mean to say is that it is not the Indian and Nepali media. They are not shaping the public opinion so much, but we are flooded with the Western contents that shapes the opinions mainly about our experts, our politicians, our journalists. I think that is the problem. Not only about the journalists, I see that the many think tanks based in New Delhi produce reports regarding Nepal, India from the Western experts and scholars. And I always find problems in those reports. In the concluding remarks, what I say is that we media should play a vital role to enhance the bilateral relations. Our reporting is based on Kathmandu and New Delhi. We get a very few local perspective. Our reporting is guided by the rhetorics of our politicians or the experts. And I always find that what politicians and experts say in the Kathmandu and New Delhi, and what is the real scenario in the border area. So I conclude my remarks to saying that obviously media should play more constructive role, and media should help to bring new issues that our politicians and policymakers of the both countries should consider to enhance the bilateral relations. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Kamaldev Bhattrai. Distinguished panelists and dear participants, thank you so much for your wonderful remarks. We have received around 116 questions, and we hardly have 25 minutes. So I don't know how I'm going to manage those questions because it's flooded the questions, so it's very difficult for me to select. So what I do, I randomly pick from different platforms. There are a few questions, many questions addressed to Professor Moni, but there are many questions which is not mentioned who has to address. So maybe different panelists can pick and give their comments. Let me start with 3 or 4 set of questions, and then we can ask everyone to make their remarks. First is that, how can India and Nepal promote cultural engagement, especially through Ramayana circuit and Buddhist circuit? What opportunities does it bring for both the countries? That is one. Another is,
battery level low.
Another is why India is not cooperating to let Bhairava airport to run in its full capacity. That is the question. The other question is it time for the
Disconnected.
revision of India-Nepal Friendship Treaty, taking into consideration new realities? There's another question particularly addressed to Professor Muni, that why Nepali Prime Minister Prachanda wants to visit India without any proper agenda, and why India is not giving priority to his visit. Professor Muni, you have a special request on this. What is the permanent solution on Nepal-India border dispute? What does India want from Nepal related to security issues? There's another question, that why is India concerned about Nepal-China railway? Is it not going to bring benefits to India as well? This has been addressed to
the question answered.
Then there's another question to Professor Muni, that what can be the reason behind India not accepting the EPG report, Eminent Person Group report? There's another question particularly addressed to Ambassador Ray, that how can India and Nepal work together to address shared environmental challenges such as climate change and natural disaster? What steps can be taken to enhance the institutional framework for India-Nepal cooperation, and how can the two countries build a more sustainable and productive partnership in the years ahead? There is a similar question, that how can Nepal and India collaborate to promote renewable energy development and address the challenge of climate change? Again, this has been also asked to Nihar, a similar question to Nihar and Mr. Ray. There is one question which is very interesting. I have never heard about it. Is maybe Major General Binod Basnet or Nihar can comment on that. Is that because I've not heard about it, that China is willing to recruit the Gorkha soldier in its PLA, People's Liberation Army. What measures and reforms must be undertaken to guarantee that India may regain the Gorkha soldiers' trust, and that the ties between India and Nepal are not weakened? I don't know. I've not heard about this. Maybe first you can comment whether such things are taking place. So let me request each of the panelists to give their comments, and then we'll take another set of questions. Let me start with Professor Muni. Professor, sir.
Well, I didn't get all the questions which you addressed to me, but 2, 3 let me comment on them. Buddhist and Hindu circuits are directly affecting people, and therefore both in India, I mean in India also has a very strong claim on Buddhism besides being Hinduism, and Nepal has tied Buddhism to its identity. Nepal, when talking to India, it emphasizes more on Buddhism rather than on Hinduism, though whatever the reality is at the social level. So I think developing these pilgrimage sectors will encourage people to visit each other countries in a big way. With also a lot of changes going on in India, Ram Temple is coming as a great pilgrimage center, and many of the Nepalese may like to visit that. So it will touch people, and I think it will encourage people-to-people contacts. Prachanda's visit, I don't know why this controversy has arisen. The real problem is that Prachanda's cabinet is still not complete. The political scene in Nepal is one of instability and uncertainty as to what can happen. Look, Prachanda has already got 2 votes of confidence. Now people are talking of the 3rd vote of confidence. So unless political situation stabilizes, no major policy decisions can be taken. So what is the point in the visit? I mean, I don't see why Prachanda should be keen on the visit before that, or why should India be keen on the visit before that. China question is a major one between India and Nepal. I think the problem partly is of India unable to evolve a China policy which is effective. And partly because, India cannot say to Nepal that you can't have relations with China. Because India has great relationship with China, almost in every field. And I mean, trade, India is the largest trading partner of China in South Asia. In terms of investment, India is therefore there is, I don't understand this problem from India's perspective, except that when it affects security. Now, everything cannot be linked to the security. India has to guard its own interest. And a great deal of the expansion of Chinese influence in Nepal is based upon Nepal's alienation from India. The kind of policies which we have pursued, I mean, the so-called blockade, the question of influencing the constitutional process, the lack of infrastructure. Nihar was giving a long list of how infrastructure projects have been completed. Now, we have not even completed what you call integrated checkposts. We wanted to make 4, but they have not all been completed so far. And there are many other infrastructure projects in Nepal which India could have taken. Say Kathmandu to Pokhara Road, airports. Why India cannot allow all the airports in Nepal to fly to India and have more of those airports? What is the problem? So there are problems on both the sides. Now, EPR is everybody in Nepal asks me that why India is not accepted to EPR. Please tell me one thing, if government of Nepal has officially accepted EPR. The EPR is not officially even presented to Nepal because, one of the members of the Indian EPR group, Dr. Upreti, died before he could sign it. And then there was no consensus. I can say it very, very frankly to whatever I have gathered, that there was no consensus amongst the Indian participants on what report has to be accepted. It was only Mr. Bheg Bahadur Thapa who said, this is the report and that's what we are doing. So, the half-baked EPR report cannot be accepted by any side. It has not been accepted by any side. And EPR, I have a very cynical view on EPR, that the governments appoint reports when they don't want to take a decision. There is nothing on the table in the EPR which Government of India and Government of Nepal together cannot decide. There are no facts which are not known to them. There are no complexities which they cannot resolve. But they wanted to postpone it, so they put an EPR. And they got 3-4 years when everybody was happy saying, okay, EPR is working, so we will have a solution out of it. The bilateral solutions don't come out of these things anywhere. So I don't know why such a big issue is being made of the EPR, which to my mind is absolutely redundant. I stop here.
Thank you, sir. May I move to Ambassador Ray?
Yeah, thank you, Pramod. That's really a very large number of questions, and I don't think I've got all of them. But on the shared environmental challenges and renewable energy and preparation for disaster management, a couple of things. Our environment is so interconnected virtually all the rivers from Nepal flow into India. And I think integrated river basin management is something that we should start looking at. And when I say this, it's not just Nepal and India, but also Bangladesh, because most of these flow into Bangladesh. So I think this is a very important issue. So far, we have looked at this very bilaterally, but I think we should have to take a more integrated approach. Secondly, I remember when I was there, President Rambaran Yadav had started this big campaign for the afforestation of the Chure Hills, the Shivalik Hills in Nepal, because there was a lot of deforestation and stuff like that, and the hills were disappearing, a lot of quarrying, etc. So that's the other factor. I think we really need to look at say programs for afforestation, which will also prevent floods downstream, and especially this carriage of silt into the rivers, as a result of which river beds are rising and creating, you remember the 2008 Kosi East Bank disaster. On the disaster management, I think in 2015, we've gained a lot of experience, our two countries. And this is something that we should build on, in terms of capacity building, in terms of joint action, joint cooperation. And here, I think our two militaries played a very important role in addition to the disaster management authorities in both countries, and the National Disaster Response Force in India. So I think this is another area which is of critical importance. And some of this cooperation is going on. For instance, sometimes there are these temporary lakes that are created upstream due to huge landslides, etc. And then there's a fear that the lake will burst and result in downstream floods. So, it's very important to have this as a very important, as a principal issue in the development partnership between the two countries. And the same thing for renewable energy. In India, we have this the solar mission. And I think 100 gigawatts is what our aim is in terms of solar energy. So this is another area that we should also be looking at. Of course, Nepal is blessed with hydropower, but I think it would be useful also to look at some of the other aspects of renewable energy. On the EPG report, I think Professor Muni has already made the point very clear. As far as my understanding is, I haven't seen the report, but the principal issue is how to deal with the 1950 treaty. And I think both countries are prepared to review this treaty. And perhaps the time has now come for the two foreign secretaries to really begin negotiations on what a new treaty would look like. And I think it's quite doable. I don't think it's something that is very difficult to achieve. And there's absolutely no harm in at least a conversation beginning between the two countries. On the airports, I really don't know whether it's not for me to say, it's really for the people and government of Nepal to decide. But 4 international airports in Nepal, and are they going to be viable? I know in Nepal, everybody's blaming India that, India is not providing access and so on. But really, for a country of 3 crore people, and I don't know how many tourists, maybe 1 million tourists you get, 4 international airports, that's, Pokhara, Bhairava, Kathmandu, and there's talk of Nijgarh. Is it really going to be viable? I mean, this kind of investment, I think there needs to be some very detailed thinking and on this issue. So I am a little skeptical about some of these, some of these projects. Of course, on this air routes, etc., I think negotiations are going on, and I hope some progress is made in terms of entry and exit for aircraft. There are certain concerns, I think, on our side, and perhaps it's best to convey these to the Nepalese side directly, so that there can be some progress. I think there was some other issues, but I can't recall all of them. So I think I'll stop here.
Thank you, sir. May I move to Binod Basnet? Sir, over to you. Vinod sir, you're on.
Okay.
Yes.
One thing is, I think, can you hear me now? Yeah. Okay. One thing is, I think media is a very important platform to shape the perceptions of the people. I mean, there is no doubt everyone will see this year theory. But we must also realize that a secretary of from the United States came to Nepal, Nuran came to Nepal on getting things correctly on the disinformations and misinformations flow in Nepal. So regarding the Gorkha recruitment for China is I mean it's a thing that can't be imagined at all. One. The second is this is disinformation. This is information. I don't think there is any truth in this at all. But what we must be aware from all this in the environment is what is disinformation and misinformation is doing to the bilateral relationship that Nepal and India enjoys, rather than being used against this or against that or framing up different things. So regarding that particular question set, the other thing I would like to bring out about the foreign policies that we adopt is its convenience. And it is political convenience. It is a development convenience for your municipality. It is convenience on how much money is going to come. You know, like the recent case in Bhutanese refugees. Look at the principles of the fraud case in the Bhutanese refugees. So these are, our policies have been driven by convenience, whether it is money, monetary benefits, whether it is the positional benefits, or whether it is political convenience, or Dr. Professor Muni was bringing out about and Ambassador Ray also brought out again. What is it that Nepal really needs for a long-term strategic outlook? How many international airports do we actually need? So I brought out the point about the strategic planning, lack of strategic thoughts, lack of strategic plannings. How many international airports for what do we need? So that we could. It can't be a decision, a political decision for the Exim Bank to pour in money like in Pokhara Airport in loans 2%, or more than what the World Bank and the IMF gives, and pay back in 30 years in 26 installments. So what is that airport going to do? The international airport right in between, not to a big valley, domestic airports with more technology would have been much better. So I think there should be a really strategic thoughts on what we need, like for development. So that's why when I put out the point about way forward, it is strategic planning. And because of the proximity that we are, Nepal and India, it has to come together. All the strategic plannings have to come together so that the people of both the nations benefit. And the people, for example, the pipelines, it's coming in other parts of the country as well. But look what happened to the Raxol Amleganj pipeline that came. The immediate impact was 2 rupees reduction in a liter in the year. So this is what we need. The livelihood in the hills and the mountains must be, cost effective. It can't be, So the Nepalese policymakers must also look into the fact, not for convenience, but for strategically putting things on the right direction so that the Nepalese benefit, whether it is the utilization of resources, water resources, whether it is irrigation, whether it is energy, whether it is for food security, for irrigation, whatever. But it has to come together as a strategically thought plans for long-term benefits for Nepal, for India, and for China as well. So this has to be really thought about. So the Indian policymakers, the politicians, have to stop politicizing, stop corruption, and stop for political convenience to come to power. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Kamaldev Bhattrai, do you have anything to add or respond to any questions?
From the media perspective, what I want to say is that the problem we face either in New Delhi or Kathmandu is that we don't get the information, we don't get the background informations. Officials from both sides don't share in details. For example, as Estimuni sir said, it is better if all issues are clearly spelled out. For example, both sides should clearly say that what is the problem in receiving EPG instead of keeping or don't saying anything. If we don't provide informations, backgrounds to the journalist, obviously in the absence of reliable informations, rumors are spreading. That is what is happening between Nepal in Kathmandu and New Delhi. So my suggestion is, please improve the information system on both sides, provide background information to the journalist, inform journalists about the problems. For example, we discuss a lot of issues on the air connectivity, EPG, other issues that are pending for the long time. But I think very few journalists or very few people know that what is the actual problem. And in the absence of information, many misleading news are traveling both in New Delhi and Kathmandu. I have not seen any intensive interactions between journalists and authorities of both sides. For example, frankly speaking, that I have not seen that the Indian ambassador in Kathmandu is facing any press conference or the on-the-record meeting with journalists. The same may be happening in the New Delhi. I have not seen any media interview of the Indian ambassador in Kathmandu or Nepali ambassador in New Delhi that highlights the bilateral issues, that provides the larger pictures, that provides the recent trajectory of the bilateral relations. In such scenario, we cannot improve the current status. So my final, again, what I want to say is that there is a serious flaw in the communication or information system that we need to improve immediately if we want more, if we expect more reliable, trusty, and accurate information and analysis both in Kathmandu and New Delhi about each other. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bhattrai. We have only 3 minutes, but let me take one or two last questions because there is a strong request from parties. Please ask my questions. So let me try. One is that what is the status of proposed Kathmandu-Raxaul railway project and how will it impact Nepal-India relation? What is causing the delay in Raxaul-Kathmandu railway, though it was announced 5 years ago? Second is like there are lots of questions and what should be Prachanda's priority during his visit to India. That was asked for Dr. Deepak Bhatta, but he had to leave. But there are other questions in similar lines like what should be the priority of Nepal in India during the upcoming visit of Nepalese Prime Minister to India. So Nihal, would you like to add this as well as you also have to address one question on climate change? So maybe we can start with Nihal.
Thank you, Pramod, once again. Look, I think we once initially you asked a different question to me. Now I think you have reframed the question. So anyway, but I'll slightly touch upon that this Agnipath and China's recruitment to Gorkhas. I think briefly touch on that. These are two separate issues. There is no connection between Agnipath and Chinese recruiting to Gorkhas. So we can't club it together. Yes, it is a bilateral relationship between Nepal and China. Whether Gorkhas will be joined Nepal army, sorry, Chinese army or not, that's a between two separate issues. So I don't think any connection between here Agnipath and China's recruitment. If they feel that China do, this is between Nepal and China to decide that. It's very clear. Coming to the Roxal Kathmandu railway, obviously the status is like this. Currently, the feasibility study is completed, and Government of India very much committed on this, because if you remember the last two prime ministerial visits from the India side and Nepal side, in the joint statement, they have given a lot of emphasis on two issues. The first one is the infrastructure and particularly the physical connectivity, and then inland waterways connectivity. And the third is basically the energy connectivity, particularly the hydro energy cooperation. So the Roxal Kathmandu railway connectivity will be definitely materialized as soon as possible. I think the work is in progress, I can say that. Now, because of why it is not substantially progressed, you can say the 5 years it has been done, because again the land acquisition, and second is the environmental clearances, the two major issues we have been halting the progress of this project. What was the second question, Pramod, on this?
One was on climate change, which was also asked to Ambassador Ray on how both the countries can cooperate on renewable energy development and meet the challenges of climate change.
Look, both the countries are committed to basically fulfill their Paris Agreement, and both are basically committed to basically reduce the carbon emission substantially by 2030 and 2070 from Government of India side. And renewable energy plays a very key role in that, basically materializing that commitment. And the hydro energy cooperation is already is a one major factor and the sector of that renewable energy cooperation. So I think this is very much there. And again, I can say that both the countries are committed, and I think a lot of hydro projects are now going to be developed under this arrangement. So I think from India side, one thing Government of India may also encourage one thing, that solar energy and that hydro energy should be focused more on that, basically that can help basically India to purchase electricity from Nepal, and also for the regional trading purposes also. I think disaster management, I think the institutional cooperation is missing, as Ambassador Rai said that we are basically a lot of ecological connectivity and commonality there, and we should be integrated river basin management approach should be there. I think that is, I completely agree with him. But disaster management, I think the institutional cooperation is missing. Maybe during the next visit of Prime Minister of Nepal to India, I think the focus should be more on the disaster management, because whenever any floods happens in Nepal, that water comes to India, particularly in the Kosi and other rivers also. So that institutional mechanism should be there too, and data sharing also should be there. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So would you like to address what should be Prachanda's priority during his visit, or what should be India and Nepal's priority during this visit?
Look, one thing is that, see, I can say that I think India-Nepal relations, there could be many people, they may criticize India-Nepal relations. There could be ups and downs in the relationship. Overall, I can say the relationship at this moment is doing very well. What we need is basically the retuning of the relationship, because the treaties are there, a lot of arrangement, social mechanism are there, that should be reactivated. And it needs to be basically, if some treaties are not functioning, that needs to be updated. That's the one thing. Second is political connectivity. Previously, maybe a decade before, maybe the 2 decades before, I think political connectivity was quite strong. And currently, that connectivity is missing, and the particularly political party level cooperation, political party level visit delegation from the political level, it should be more. And the political connectivity should be more between two relationship. And Prime Minister and Prachanda will be visiting, I think they may discuss about this issue also, because high level delegational visit is very important. And the second thing is basically the synchronization of policies. As I said, that maybe the energy cooperation, infrastructure cooperation, and that is very important, particularly in strengthening trade and investment. Because why government of Indian investors are not taking much interest in Nepali market? Because number one, the political instability. Second, the investment policy in Nepal doesn't have any clarity. because the repatriation policy is completely very lot of confusion is there. A lot of layers basically get their repatriation, whatever profit they will get, that will be difficult to get return, because at this moment this free flow of money exchange arrangement is not there. So that should be one. But although the UPI digital connectivity we are talking about, but that has to be activated, and particularly Nepal Rashtra Bank is not still sitting on that file, and they're not very cooperative in this regard. So that to be cooperative in particular digitizing the economic connectivity. And the last, I think one challenge is that the most important again, as Professor Mune said that, Mr. Rai said that, political stability is must. If you want to more investment, more progress, more economic cooperation, then political must. Because as I have observed, whenever a political government changes in Kathmandu, there are many policy level changes happens in Nepal also. So the investors and the stakeholders are very much basically concerned about frequent political, because recently I was talking to L&T for the investment in a project in Nepal. They told me that clearly that, look, we are not very confident on political system in Nepal and political arrangement in Nepal, because there frequently governments are being changed and the policies are also being changed. So there's major concern from Indian investor side. So that should be focused on that. And third thing is that labor migration. Because of the rapid labor migration in Nepal, it is going to affect your service sector, agricultural sector, and industrial sector. If you are not holding your skilled laborers, manpowers, then again, the investors may not invest in your country. And the three promising sector needs to be focused during the Prime Minister visit. One is the hydro cooperation, agriculture, tourism, and services sector. And last but not least, if there is a Lumini circuit, there is a Ramayana circuit, and there should be a Shiv Shakti circuit, and PASA perhaps initially, I think there could be a Manaskand circuit also, because there is a strong cultural connectivity between Sudur Paschim and Uttarakhand, because that needs to be reactivated, because that cultural connectivity is some extent missing, and it was missed during colonial period. That needs to be reactivated. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Professor Muni, would you like to comment on what should be the priority of both the countries during Prachanda's visit to India?
No, I don't really know when the visit will take place to begin with. And secondly, I think Nepali side every time says pending projects. I underlined the priorities in three manner, as I told you earlier. On hydropower and connectivity, there should be firm and concrete decisions. On skill development and education and industrialization within Nepal, where again the two sides can invest. You know, Niyar was talking about the investment climate. Recall the BIPA, which Baburam Bhattrai finalized, and Nepal has not taken any firm decision on that as yet. On the other hand, so far as Chinese are concerned, I have seen some of their BRI agreement texts, and they very clearly say that Nepal will have to respect the Chinese investment and protect the Chinese investment. So Nepal has committed itself to protecting the Chinese investment. Nepal is not willing to commit itself to protecting the Indian investment. If that doesn't take place, then a lot of Indian investment or Indian businessmen going to Nepal is a daydream, because people will not go if their money is not assured or money is not being protected. And thirdly, I think with Prachanda in power, Maoist in power, both New Delhi and Kathmandu will have to think how to deal with China, because the difference between them in dealing with China will again not take the bilateral relations very far, because as General Basnet has said very clearly, it's a security issue, and security is one of the prime issues so far as bilateral relations are concerned. I think some of these areas will have to be probed and explored if and when Prachanda's visit takes place.
Thank
Yeah.
you, sir.
Can I just
But
add
I
one?
wanted to make one point to Kamal. You know, Kamal, you are defending the journalists that they don't get information. But look, here is a concrete example which the Nepali media has character assassinated me so many times without asking for anything. I mean, every time they mention me, raw agent, bloody fool. I mean, I have never ever seen the raw building in Delhi. But you guys go on writing. You guys go on writing about my links with Maoist, forgetting that my links with Nepal starts with 1967. The Maoists have appeared only in 1954, 1994. Before that, there were no Maoists. But Muni was always active in Maoist. All this is a media creation. And probably the media created it because prompted by the royalists earlier, and now out of information or out of just
Battery
joking,
level
because nobody is
low.
there to defend me. So you go on writing whatever you want. So please, I mean, I accept your proposition that the officials in New Delhi and Kathmandu do not share enough information. But don't absolve the media itself. Media has been irresponsible in many cases. I can give you 24 examples related to me alone. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. May I now invite Ambassador Ranjit Ray, then we'll move to Major General Vinod Vasnath. Ambassador Ray, over to you.
Well, I don't have too much more to say, and I agree with what Nihar and Professor Muni have said. On Prachanda's visit, from my perspective, of course, hydropower was mentioned, but I do hope something can be done on Pancheshwar. It seems to have got stuck again. And I hope very much that, there is a clear commitment, not only a commitment, but perhaps, some decision that within 6 months, the joint DPR should be endorsed or approved or something like that. And secondly, I think one area that perhaps has a lot of potential, I mentioned this earlier, is the digitization of the economy. How the citizen to government interface can be made through electronic means. And in India, I think we've achieved a lot. You don't need to go to any government office for any government service anymore. You don't need to go to any bank physically for any financial service. You don't have to go anywhere to buy anything. And I know that the penetration of mobile telephony in Nepal is also huge. So I think this is one area, especially the IT area. I think if this could be, become one of the important pillars of the bilateral relationship, and this is where India has a comparative advantage, it will also appeal to this young aspirational population in Nepal. So I hope very much that, this issue is raised and we can build the cooperation in the sector. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Major Vinod Vasnath.
Yeah, okay. Let me just put a last. How should the visit be taken? I think this visit should be more a ceremonial visit than a visit of substance. Because firstly, Prachanda is the weakest prime minister, and because of various reasons that all the speakers have talked about. Second, it is his personal ambition to become the prime minister, though the party is a third on the lists on the counts. And I think the third reason is because of the degrading political image that the Maoists have in the society, is where he's come to power to play, because they believe that coming to power is an assistance to revive the, let's say, revive the ideologies and the practice of the political power still exists. But remember, like if you look at the last elections, people are very aware of the fact of particularly the urban areas. I mean, Nepal is not just urban areas, but if you look at the voting concepts of the voters, it is very different to what it was before. So, I mean, talking about day-to-day convinces is okay, but I think his visit should be more, if it happens. I mean, look at it. I mean, the other thing is, the visit shifted from, the dates are shifted. I think India is also, Delhi's really looking at the constructive of the visit. So if the visit happens, it should be more a ceremonial. You can welcome him with the red carpets, but something substance. I don't think it will happen. And if it happens, I hope he does not take it for his personal guarantees rather than because he represents the country. He is not he himself. He needs to think of the country first and later his political ambitions, and his party second.
Thank you, sir. May I now move to Mr. Kamal Dev Bhattrai?
I would just like to say that the Professor Muni talked about the media. Professor Sir, it is not only you. Many people have become the victim of the misinformation and disinformations. I have also seen such reports and the Twitter post. I don't think journalists we work in the mainstream media have done or have written in that way. Obviously, there are many problems and misinformations, and there are many areas that needs to be corrected. So, what I have seen about you in some Nepali media and Facebook post is a really injustice for you, and that is what I want to say. But we need to, at the same time, that we have the challenge to tackle with such misinformation and disinformation.
Thank you. Distinguished panelists, Professor S.T. Muni, Ambassador Ranjit Ray, Dr. Deepak Prakash Bhatt, Dr. Nihar Nayak, Major General Binod Basnet, Kamal Dev Bhattrai, and many others. Thank you so much for the wonderful session and your valuable time. We hope to have you again in the future. We would also like to thank all our wonderful participants for their questions. There was more than 120 questions. We apologize that we could not raise all the questions, but we promise to organize another session on Nepal-India relations very soon. Thank you so much and have a nice day.